Mike, good to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for being here. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, man. Good to connect with you. I know we caught up a couple weeks ago on your podcast, and it's fun. I always like, and you know this too, like podcasting. You meet some interesting folks and people that you feel like, oh man, I could have had a couple hour coffee with them and just kind of chit chat about life
Yeah.
and kind of similar stuff. And we all go through these ups and downs and inflection points and these pivotal moments in life. And I know you've went through a few here, so I know that's right in line with the Just Get Started podcast. So again, thanks for being here to chat through some of this.
Oh, you bet. Yeah. Felt like you and I could have definitely gone for, at least 2, maybe pushing 3 hours when I had you on. So I'm glad we were
Yeah,
able to connect again and get some more time out of it.
yeah, get your perspective on it because I know you talk a lot with folks that are trying to transition or in transition periods or trying to transform their lives from corporate to maybe not, you know. So I would love to start just kind of getting a background, go as deep as you want, but I know 2018 was a big year for you, and you can share why and some of the transition there, but maybe paint a picture of what was Mike like prior to 2018. What was life like? What were you going through? you know One of the big things that come up in this podcast is about identity.
Yeah.
What was your identity back then? So start us off there, and I think that'll meander us down the path.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people that I was that guy who never really knew what he wanted to do when he grew up. And I feel like maybe I still don't. But I had that notion of what success is in America, right? Like the idea that you go to college, you go try to make a bunch of money, money's going to make you happy because you can buy things, you can have experiences and all this kind of stuff. And so I feel like early in my career, I was sort of meandering. I mean, I got into finance right out of college. Sort of par for the course for that identity of mine, and realized that it wasn't the thing. It wasn't me intrinsically, and so I bounced around and did a couple of other things, consulting, got into a little bit of startup stuff, just trying to find my identity, and I think more importantly, find like what I was really good at and where I could serve people and just be good at something. In around 2016, I was kind of taking a break from the startup scene. I was starting to build a family. I was like, what's out there for me, a guy like me who's interested in innovation? And I was working for a large Fortune 500 insurance company, actually, in their innovation department. And I felt like, okay, this is maybe an experiment for me. Deep down, I probably wasn't a corporate guy ever, but I felt like there was a cool area here. I'm working with some venture capitalists and I'm kind of trying to figure out how to build new products and services. And so I went in, with open eyes. And as the years kind of progressed, 16, 17, going into 18, it just didn't feel like I was getting closer to what I needed to be. Who was I and how could I really create value and all of the usual corporate stuff, right? Like we were doing really interesting customer discovery work, and then we get ground into 9 months of PowerPoint decks and posturing and all this stuff. And I was just really like, man, I'm in my mid 30s and I still feel lost. And I've got 3 little kids at home, and I'm not exactly personally like a great person because I'm still frustrated and I'm bringing work home and I'm trying to figure out how I can still like grind and succeed on these, sort of default measures of success. And so I just said, like, what does it mean to me to live a successful life? And I really just tried to create some space at work when I was still working to like really grapple with some of these big questions of, my kids are going to be out of the house in 15 years. Like, wow, what do I want that period of time to look like? And how do I become a person that's at my best? What are the things that I personally need? And how do I give my best, create the circumstances to give my best? So these were the things that I was really just noodling on and trying to figure out. And sort of built a framework for myself to figure out what it was that was my secret sauce, what I call sort of my core advantages. And then, I did that. I put it on paper, and then I just started building a way out on the side. And I leaned on some of my past expertise in digital marketing, in search engine optimization. And I just kind of started a side hustle. And before you knew it, over a year of looking for clients and doing things on the side, I got it to a point where I could leave. I had the option to leave if I
Mhm.
wanted to. And yeah, December 2018, I just walked into my boss's office one day. I said, you know what? I'm done. Here's the deal. This is what I'm going to go do. And I had started a company called Rejoin Media. And ever since that day that I left, I haven't been back. Been working for myself, and continued to evolve my version of harmonious work life and harmonious life, like how I can be getting creativity and being creative at work and succeeding on my measures, but then also be there for my family and be there for the people that really need me the most.
Mm. And I definitely want to dig into that just a
Yeah.
little bit more. It reminds me as you say that, and I think it's somewhat similar to me as like you come to this realization. It's that Confucius quote, I believe it's
Yes.
Confucius, where it's
Yes.
we have two
Yep.
lives, or the second one begin or whatever it is,
I
right?
got it.
I'm
I got it
butchering
for you.
it.
I'll pick you up right
Yeah,
here.
yeah, pick me up, please.
It's every man has two lives, and the second begins when he realizes he only has one.
There you go. Okay, I told you it's been a long Monday already, so appreciate that.
But that's
Well,
exactly
that's
what
what
it
one
is.
podcaster does to the other. They
Right.
pick each other up,
Right.
when you get stuck. But so I think that's the realization, as you mentioned with your kids. It's like we get into the suck of I'm just going to keep grinding it out for 15, 20, 30 years, and then I'll retire and I'll be happy and I'll do whatever. But I think you start learning like that's why can't you just be happy now? Like
Yeah.
why can't I build my own thing?
Yeah.
You know
Exactly.
what? So you said December 2018 you walked in and left. I want two questions. You can start. You can take it of dealer's choice here. One is I want to understand the side hustle. Like, where did you build it to? Like, did you replace your salary? Did you have a small amount, but it was enough to get by? Let's start there. Then I'll pause on the second question, and we'll go down that rabbit hole after.
Sure. So I had some experience in search engine optimization, internet businesses, advertising, that type of thing, and so I said, how do I do this for myself? Like, let's just start there. Basic skills that I have, and how can I do this for myself? So I ended up basically acquiring and building a little portfolio of website advertising businesses. One happened to be in the career space, one was in the academic testing space, another was in the fitness industry. And I said, all right, I know enough to build content and links and try to get some of these sites up the up the Google search rankings. And but I did it as a portfolio because I said I don't know which one is going to take off. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. So how do I build a portfolio to give me, increased odds that one of these things takes off? And so I worked on all three websites. Um, Built up advertising relationships, got some traffic little by little, and started to move that up the ladder. I still needed a little bit more, in terms of before I could really leave and go really all in with the kids and wife and family and all, lifestyle and all of that. And I knew I didn't want to be in the agency game at all. Like I didn't want to have a whole bunch of clients running around with like a chicken with my head cut off. But I figured if I got one perfect client that would allow me to provide value and all my services to them and grow something meaningful there, but also be able to create the infrastructure that I needed to really grow what I called my asset side of the business. So I did that. I got one client, signed a deal, and I actually left before I had that deal inked, to start working for one company as a consultant and build a small team underneath me. And that gave me enough runway and security to say, all right, like this is real. I can go do this, work for this one client, um, and continue to build out the the uh, the asset side. And
Hmm.
luckily, that worked and I knew all good things come to an end. So I was always planning for the end of that relationship, either from them saying, "Hey, see ya, we don't need you," or by me saying, "You know what? I don't need to do this anymore." And it actually happened kind of at the same time where it was like writing on the wall. Everything that I was doing was built. We had transitioned team in house for them, and I'm making enough money over here to go ahead and leave and really double down on my the asset side of my business. So that's how it sort of went.
Well, and you make a good point about you don't need 20 clients. You had one. I mean, maybe depending on what your price point is, maybe it's 3 to 5. But
Right.
I understand, and there's a lot of great folks online that you can follow and learn from that. Say, hey, you want to replace your salary before you leave. I don't know how about you feel. I'm not a big believer in that. I think I've done it the way of you want to build up a runway,
Yeah.
whenever you're going to jump, whatever that runway is to make it satisfying for you. And then I don't think you have to replace, you just need to have momentum. How do you think about that with, again, if someone's thinking, oh, I'm going to leave in 3, 6, 12 months, how would you coach them on
Yeah.
setting that up?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's your personal risk profile. I think most people's heads go to replace my salary because that seems like a no risk situation, basically.
Mhm.
But I'm definitely with you. Like, what life is never, like, we're not dealing with one decision, right? Like, life is constant rolls of the dice. So you need to be looking at lines, not dots. Like, what is the trajectory here? And are we projecting into the future with a reasonable assessment of the odds that we are going to keep continuing this upward trajectory? And will I get there faster if I spend more time on it? Like, that is a dynamic decision. That's not a static decision. So I definitely coach people to, like, one, we got to understand just where you're at and what your general risk profile is, right? Like, that makes sense. But you definitely don't have to wait for that one point in time. And very often it can be detrimental to wait for that before, giving your brain the all clear to continue to go.
Did you have a specific fear? Like and you might be different, but most people, again, I'm looking at myself in the mirror. You're like, I'm going to leave. I'm going to do this. And then there's that fear that creeps up like, well, you kind of question it. Did you have anything like that yourself?
Absolutely. My fears are generally all about, am I good enough to make it happen? Right. I had, to that point in time, I had really resisted the idea of being front and center and being the driving force. I always felt like I was a good kind of behind the scenes guy, executor, operator. Was I ready to make every decision and have it all be on my shoulders? What would happen if just by sheer dumb luck this doesn't work out the one time I stick my neck out and try? Like, and that took a lot of conditioning and mental work, and that realization that, look, you always have another roll of the dice. Like, one failure isn't fatal. um Very oftentimes when you try to start leveling up, you might get a bigger failure than you're used to.
Mhm.
And that's almost like the prerequisite for success. And you have to understand and program yourself that the successes are still going to be bigger. If you take these upside bets on yourself and look for that upside optionality and you keep at it, like, you're going to hit something and it's going to dwarf all of your failures. And some people aren't wired to do that. But I think if you can really try to put these decisions in perspective and play the long game and realize that, like, you're on this personal journey, um, more so than just whatever the results happen, like, you're on this personal journey of, like, becoming the best version of yourself, I believe, through career, through entrepreneurship, through trying to figure out where you can use your highest talents, that, like, you can, if you have that why, you can endure almost any how. And that's kind of that's a Viktor Frankl quote, but I believe in that. And so it's a lot of just like mental framing and conditioning to get your logical mind over some of the hurdles that your heart actually wants you to jump over.
Yeah. Well, and there's also fear, right? On the other side of it is you could stay at the job and you could lose that job in 6 months.
Right.
Like we don't know if we're going to keep the job. So we think it's, I think that's the mental mind fuck, if you will, of like, oh, I'm going to be in corporate and that's the safe
Yeah.
route, but it's not safe.
Yeah. Human beings are horrible at understanding trade-offs and estimating odds, frankly. You're totally right. We look at the status quo as safe, and this is the exact reason why like abused women stay in abusive relationships. They think it is the status quo, and that is the safe path, and that there could never be an alternative where things get a lot better. We're so bad at dreaming about what things could go better than expected, and we're so good at looking at the absolute worst case scenario. And so when it comes to cost benefit analysis, right, in a decision, we are fundamentally skewed to the downside. And so we literally have to do things actively to get our brains to embrace the idea that there is a chance that things can go better than expected. Like in finance, risk isn't just downside. Risk is measured as variability around an expected value, which means up and down.
Hmm.
And our brains aren't wired for this. So I do think like having a growth mindset, um, pushing yourself for personal growth, I think they're all exercises in overcoming your brain. I think your heart, when you dream, it's your heart that's leading. Like you know where you want to go, but your brain invents all of these reasons why it can't do it. And you have to call bullshit on your brain. And you have to say, is this reality? Are these odds actually skewed this way or not? And it's hard. It's definitely
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Do you find with a lot of conversations you're having with these folks, again, in this, they want to transform, or they've talked about it. I feel like there's kind of like these padded walls in the corporation and the boundaries you're talking about earlier. Like I can't get anything done. I feel like that sometimes is like, because everyone else they're not doing the best work they can do,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also not the worst work they can do.
Right.
It's kind of just right in the middle. It just gets them the paycheck. It maybe moves the ball down the field, but that does feel safe. So it's kind of like that comfort blanket where, well, if I'm out on my own, like I have to go hunt for the clients. I have to bring the sales in. And if I don't, a paycheck maybe doesn't show up that week. Do you find that's maybe the biggest fear, or is there another one?
Yeah, I think it's I that's a really interesting point because I think what happens is people talk themselves into, shouldn't I just be grateful for where I am? And I on the surface, like that's right. Like we do need to figure out like how can we just be okay with where we're at. But I think when it comes to the angst and anxiety that percolates in somebody's life because they're just trapped, to me that's usually like I am not utilizing my talents and my creativity the way that I want to, and they're not acknowledging that that is the problem. And so that people hide behind, this is one of those brain tricks. People hide behind things like, well, you have a great job. Like other people are totally fine with what you're doing. So what's the problem?
Yeah.
Just suck it up and be happy. And I think that creeps into people. So you have to be ruthless with listening to yourself. And you have to just say like, what am I willing to tolerate or not tolerate anymore?
Yeah.
What is my definition of a successful full life? And if your definition of a successful full life at 80 years old or 83 years old when you're gone or on your deathbed is, you know what, he sucked it up and he did the grind and all of that kind of stuff, then okay. But I would say 95% of the people that answer that way are lying to themselves.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of what you're touching on, one of the subjects here is, because you did this, I'm doing this, is you didn't start a business around a passion. Now, maybe you're a passion about SEO, probably not.
No.
I don't know. but you did it around a skill. And do you find, I think that's where a lot of folks disconnect, because they've heard so for so many years, you got to follow your passion. And they're like, well, I don't know how to make money from pickleball.
Right.
So they don't go forward. So I have to imagine that's coming up in a lot of these conversations, because I hear it enough. And I struggle with it too. I don't know if you did. Of like, oh, I got to go through my passion. It's like, well, no, why don't I go with my number one skill? And that could be my exit ramp. Doesn't mean I have to do that forever.
Right. It goes back to the lines, not dots thing, right? I think you're not trying to pick the one business. You're not trying to pick the one thing. You're trying to get to the next level in a video game, or you're trying to get to the next, stair step that gets you to the foundation that gets you to the next piece. So, yeah, I was saying like, all right, I have a interest in a whole bunch of different things. I can't really pin it down. This passion thing, yeah, like if I was going to pick the one thing that I'm super passionate about, maybe it would be like coaching high school sports or something like that. That might not get it done on the creativity side. So I took like, there's all of these different areas of your personality and your identity. And I tried to analyze myself in all of these areas. I'm like, well, what gives me the highest odds of getting out? And I came to the conclusion like, okay, I have hard skills. People have told me about these specific hard skills. I sort of know what to do. I could still be wrong, but let's start there. It wasn't a passion. I don't love advertising. I don't love SEO, any of that stuff. I don't like it at all, but it got me out. And then as I continued to push on that, what are my genuine interests? How do I like to solve problems? What are the problems worth my time and the rest of my life to try to solve? I got more and more passionate about the area of career change, career transition, um, and just frankly how people manage big changes. And I thought that was a really ripe area for me to spend a lot of time. And so now I work more and more on career, coaching people through these changes. How do people go from corporate, I say corporate cube to entrepreneur? Like, how do you make that transition, right? How can I teach it? How can people learn from me? And more importantly, how do I take all of what I'm learning about change and managing change and teach it to my kids? Because that I think is the number one skill that they need for the future, is the ability to adapt and change. So I'm really doing all of this like with that as my guiding light. Um, and my passion, I've built more passion for this just by
Yeah.
following my interest and leaning into what I do well and combining those two things. It wasn't just like pick off a smorgasbord and like that's the thing. It's a development.
Yeah, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I remember Seth Godin told me once, which is it just really changed my view on this exact topic. He said, he's like, you'll find most people that are successful, it becomes their passion. They
Yeah.
didn't start out that way, but when you become successful, it's interesting what happens. Your mindset's like, oh, I'm passionate about this. Well, why? Well, because I built a business that's successful, right? I have this better lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't have to start out having it your passion. I do think that, picking your number one skill, because that's how you can make the leap a lot quicker,
Yeah.
to
It
starting.
gives you a starting point. Again, I think about odds all the time. Like, how do I create high odds that I'm going to succeed over time? Well, you can't just pick something that you've never done before or that you're not any good at. You're at a competitive disadvantage to somebody who has the skill and or really likes that area. But if you
Yeah.
have some skill there, you can solve some problem that somebody will pay money for. That is a great starting point. Then you can start to layer in everything else about your interest, your curiosity, how you work, how you learn. You can wrap all of those things in it and create more and more advantages along your pathway. But you got to start
Yeah.
somewhere, and it doesn't make sense to start from zero. Start from somewhere that where you have some type of, expertise or competence.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I would say, not if you're not going to start a business, you could certainly start a hobby to learn.
Totally.
That's how this podcast started, right? It's like, so I think that's another thing, folks, is like, well, if I can't start a business, why am I doing it? Well, maybe you do it because you're like, oh, I never considered that. Let me try it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then maybe that turns into something. And because Did you find? I don't know if you found this. I'm speaking on myself here, but I have to imagine similar. You found these intersects
Yes.
of like, I'm really good this. I like doing it this way, and now you become like that one of one. You're
Yes.
the only one that can do it that specific way. How important is that?
Yes. And I think that is just self learning, it's self improvement, it's self reflection, 100%. So, just as an example, when I was younger, people told me that I was a very good speaker. Like I could stand up and come up with something quickly and articulate it and hold a room.
Mhm.
And number one, I didn't really like it. And number two, I didn't know how to use that like in any way. Again, when I'm 20, in my 20s. Well, in 2018, when I'm doing all this reflection and I'm trying to figure out like what am I really good at, and that came up again. And some of my friends said, "Yeah, you're really good at that." And my parents and other coworkers would say that. Interesting. So I buy this site called Career Cloud. It has a podcast on it, and it's not topics that I'm particularly curious about or interested in, resume writing and things like that. But I said, "Hey, that's where I could use it." And when do I have the best conversations? When I'm one on one with somebody. Perfect. So, how about I start talking about the topics that I really like, career change, mental stuff, all of this. And I have a one on one conversation with somebody, and then I just put it out to the internet. So, I'm not worried about the thousands of people that are actually listening. They're not in the room with me. I'm just having a one on one conversation with Brian. And I'll tell you what, I will continue to do it just because I enjoy it and it's networking and I get to meet great people like you where I wouldn't have otherwise. And so there's all of these positive externalities from just picking up the hobby and doing the thing and then layering in how I want to do it, designing it how it needs to be for me to be good at it. I see people all the time that say, I'm just dying at work. I can't get anything done. My boss is on me, all of this stuff, right? That people say. And then they go just start a hobby. Could be woodworking, it could be making
Mhm.
something online, and it's not generating any money for them. But you know what? They feel like 1,000 times happier.
Yeah.
Why? Because they have a creative outlet. That's my hypothesis. Every person needs a creative outlet, even people that don't think that they're creative. They all want to solve problems in a creative way that's unique to them. And if
Right.
they do that, their world changes in an instant. So I'm a huge fan of that. Like it doesn't have to be a business. Don't put that pressure on yourself to find the one business. Start to pay attention to your curiosities, your interests. Let Just see where it takes you. It could turn into a business or it could turn into just the way that you get your outlet and now you can tolerate everything else at work.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, and whether it's you're building a side hustle or hobby, what are some of the best productivity methods that you've used to help folks? 'Cause I hear the I'm busy, and I was guilty as charged for many years of I'm busy until I actually looked at the calendar and realized I could reprioritize things.
Yeah. So I am not a huge fan of traditional productivity advice and all of that kind of stuff. In my opinion, the biggest productivity hack out there is to get super clear on like, what your North Star is. Because if you understand and pay attention to what lights you up, like not from a passion standpoint, energy standpoint, the topics, the things that you do well, what I call your advantage map, um,
Mhm.
you start to everything else falls away. So selection, the prioritization of what is important in your life to go after, everything else just sort of can fall away. So like that's number one. I think number two is the word no. Honestly, and there are all sorts of ways to do this amicably at work, but I was actually written up in a Wall Street Journal article on I think the title was "Just Leave Me Alone at Work so I can do my job," because I had all of these like techniques for saying no and getting out of meetings and not saying, just not doing useless stuff. I prioritized. I was like, here's what I make an hour, what you pay me an hour. Like, do you want me in this 14-person meeting or not? there's all those types of ways. Dedicated carve out time. I went to my wife and I said, "Hey, look, I know we got a couple small kids, but like I need an hour or two every Saturday morning at a coffee shop. I'll get up, I'll go, but like I need that. Are you with me? Like I need to make a transformation here. I need to really put the work in, getting that buy-in. Um, Beyond those things, like I have ADHD really bad, and I've recently diagnosed, and so like I have been building out systems in Notion to just make sure I'm tracking stuff that I would normally not have the dopamine to do, but just to make sure that I have things set. I'm using the get things done methodology within Notion and just trying to track all of that stuff. So at a very tactical level, I have to go really hard to make sure I get everything done. But generally, I think the biggest bang for your buck is to just have the alignment of that what you are working towards is worth your time.
Yeah, I like saying no. I would agree with that. That's a big one. Have you seen the Eisenhower matrix? Do you know what
Yeah,
that is?
totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's helpful for people as well. If anyone has, they can search up President Eisenhower. But yeah, I think that's because that's the one thing that really helped me many years ago. Of like, okay, I'm saying yes to too many things that are popping up
Yeah.
versus pushing them away. I have this Friday free for all thing I do now, where I push everything to Friday and then I just pop it out. Um, but the whole point to what you said is like the North Star is not those, the email that's scattered in from someone I don't know. I'll get to that in a few days.
Yeah.
Not important today.
Yeah. And so the problem with me and having ADHD is that like I'll say no to all of that stuff and then it'll just get buried. And so some of those things they need to get done, right? They still need to get done, but they don't rise to a level of importance in my brain chemistry ever. So just being able to like sort of track the tasks that I have in a dynamic way and see them and have a reminder like, oh yeah, okay, just go delegate that, or you just take 2 minutes and just do that thing. Um, I need it because I don't normally do things that way. But yeah, I'm much more like 30,000 foot level. Am I aligned? Am I working towards the right thing? Everything else will take care of itself. My wife jokes like I could walk straight over the laundry pile and not even bat an eye. And she's like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, you bring up your wife, and this actually circled me around to the question I had earlier. So that's maybe apropos to talk about it. Going back to 2018, and you could talk about it now too, but definitely back 2018 because this is the thing that comes up a lot with people leaving is having that support at home. Now, I don't know if your wife worked or not. Some people have the dual income, so it could work out. Others, they're supporting the family. Give me an idea of how that support is at home and how important that's been for you to be able to branch out and do your own thing.
Yeah, I think it's super important. I see the conflict all the time of people who are hurting at work and hurting for that calling, but their spouse is cool with the lifestyle that they have now, right? And they view it as, well, are we going to have to like downsize or, and they're very fearful and apprehensive about it. So I encourage everybody to, have these open discussions because doing it as a team matters. So my wife did work, does still work and she did at the time, but it wasn't like we were just going to be able to, she was going to be able to cover us for forever. Like wasn't that type of situation. It was more like I just wanted her to understand how some of the issues I was experiencing, were coming over and bleeding into our personal life, and how I thought I could address these by changing, changing my work and doing something for myself and showing our kids to be bold and, and go for things and all of that. And she was like, yeah, I see it. You're you're conflicted all the time. You go up and down and you're not happy, right? Like I want you to be happy. So go for this. And if you need that, cool. Like that's fine. Like here, I'll take your time. And I just want to know that you have a sane plan, to not just leave us hung out to dry. And so we talked about that. It was, here's my steps. Here's what I want to do. I'm not going to leave till I have, this milestone hit. Um, and we just worked it out together. But it is hard when you guys aren't on the same page. And so we actually coach couples to talk about this stuff openly. What's the investment in the program? What do you need? Where does your spouse feel comfortable with you getting before you leave? How can we engineer some of the things that are happening at work to be less, and to create more time and space, or to isolate you from different types of stressors as a way to baby step your way to the transition or the transformation? But it's huge.
Did you struggle at all when you got on your own? And maybe maybe you're still struggling, I don't know, but with the drawing the line in the sand of work versus, because now it's not, I can leave my Fortune 500 job and go home on the weekend and not get bothered. You can take work home. You can do that, with obviously your own business. So I'm kind of curious how you draw lines in the sand. Are there any constraints you put in?
Yeah, I didn't have a problem at all. And that was because I was looking at my life holistically. How did I want to feel in the different phases of my life? I very vividly wanted to build a business. I don't care about the size and scale. I, number one, wanted it to be mine, right? For
Okay.
me and the people that I want to serve. And number two, I want it to be designed around my life. So I actually built the business because I envisioned I want to work from home, and I want to be the call that the school makes, the first call that the school makes. If one of my kids is sick, I want to be the guy. I thought that was like kind of a cool flex that I
Yeah.
could be the
Yeah.
dad,
Yeah.
right? The dad entrepreneur that was like, all right, we're going to call Mike, and I can drop everything. I could say, Brian, love you, man, but we're going to have to pick this podcast up later because I got to go pick up my kid. Right now, today, I've got a sick kid at home with me. He's home from school, sick. He's hanging out in the other room right now. As soon as we get off, I'm going to go play with him. That was the life that I envisioned. And so I don't have any problems being like, hey, I'm gone at 5, not going to return any calls. I communicate with my team and with others, and I set expectations. I'm like, if you need me right now, call me. If it can wait an hour or two, hit me on Slack. And if it can wait a day, email me. And that's worked really, really well. I don't get bothered on off hours. I don't have a ton of fires that I have to put out. If I'm working on a weekend, it's because I want to.
Yeah.
So it was pretty easy, and it was pretty intentional, for me to put the walls up.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so important. You went back to even when you were talking about 2018, like that was the vision forward, is like,
Yeah.
what's my lifestyle? What do I want it to be over these next, dozen, 15 years
Yeah.
versus getting stuck in that corporate kind of slog of like, okay, I have to be at a meeting at 5 p.m. because
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
And so sometimes people have a really hard time looking at like the really big picture questions. It's like, oh shit, like that's huge. Where do I start to really think about that?
Yeah.
And I think the starting point is to invert the problem. Don't ask what you want. Start to make a list of what you don't want anymore. Like, what are you unwilling to tolerate anymore? And so
Mhm.
the list that I started with, again, that's where I started. The list that I started with was like, I don't want to have to travel for work. If I travel, I want it to be because I want to do it. Um, I don't want to raise money anymore. Like for a startup, I had raised money previously. I never want to do that again. So I want 100% ownership. I want to bootstrap it. Some of the other things were like, I don't want, obviously nobody wants useless meetings, but like, I don't want to feel like I have to be somewhere just to show face. I want our team to be relentlessly worried about, output and work product rather than posturing. So like, I want to be able to work remotely. I want my team to work remotely. There were all sorts of things that spawned from just saying like, what do I not want? And how do I engineer that? And then the wheels started turning about, okay, what do I really want? And it ends up going to a feeling. I was like, what is the feeling that I want to engineer for my life at home, at work? I want it to be creative. I want it to be free flowing. I want it to feel like I'm making a difference with people directly, one to one, making a massive impact in their lives. So that's just how it started. But it all started from the seed of what am I unwilling to tolerate anymore?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the word that comes up that I talk about a lot with this just get started mission is control.
Yeah.
You want to be in the driver's seat and have control. And it goes back to what you're mentioning, that suck that we all get into is like, oh, I leave college, I go to entry level job, I work my way up. And it's kind of like I think of how many people I still remember one of the best decisions I ever made. I got asked, this is probably 5 years ago now, I got asked to be like the director of like the sales team. And I was an individual contributor. And I said no because I knew all the crap. To your point, I knew like I'm going to have to now make spreadsheets and I'm going to have to
Yeah.
be at these useless meetings. And I'm like, I don't want that. I'm actually really good
Yeah.
being an individual contributor. I want to stay there. And actually, the CEO, it was a pretty good company. And the CEO like knew me well. He's like, I'm surprised you turned that down. I was like, yeah, this is how I want to live my life, kind of going forward. So to your point, I think that's something. Even if I think people aren't leaving a job today, or maybe the next couple of years, it's how do you think about those decisions? Because yeah, you might get a promotion and a few more dollars, but what else does that bring into your life where you can't do the things, the date nights or the kids' games or whatever it is. And I think a lot of folks struggle with that because they take the extra role and then they're like, crap,
Yeah.
I'm stuck.
So I use the term be self-directed. I use the term self-directed all the time because I feel like what happens is we just get on default paths, right? Like we have this default view of how your life should progress. You get a job, they start paying you well, you do better, you get promotions. And then it becomes this like the means or the end, like making more money is what you should be doing like until what into perpetuity. And I mean just take a look at like who's ahead of you. Do you want their life? Maybe, maybe not. Do you want to do the things that they're doing? Do you want to fight the battles that they're doing? Or is it just like this is what society's programmed us to do? Get to VP and make X amount of dollars and then everything's going to be great. I challenge people to rethink retirement, honestly. Like from my vantage point, seeing what I've seen and doing what I've done, I tell people like I actually don't want to retire. I hope I'm like my grandma and who worked until like into her 90s. Like I hope I am doing this stuff where I want to make an impact and get paid for it. And I can scale that up or down. I can,
Mhm.
if I want to go on vacation, I can take my laptop. I can work a couple hours. I envision being a retiree as still working and just being and just having limits and just having a balance. But like why do I want to sock it all away and then just sit on a beach? We
Yeah.
are creative beings. We want to help people. We want to give back. And so I feel like in my 40s, I am setting that up and I'm
Mhm.
living now and I'm retiring now because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Like that to me is the long term plan. So to each their own, but it's just like these, the opportunities are there. The technology is there. And the labor system is fracturing in a way that you can solve problems in a one-to-one or one-to-multi situation and you can get paid and you can enjoy your life and you can have a great balance. You don't have to work for a corporation. Now, for most people, that's going to be the way that it is. And I'm not sure everyone needs to be an entrepreneur, but like these opportunities are available. And I think
Mhm.
we need to do a better job of really setting aside the time to investigate all of the opportunities that are available to us and the ways of working. And that's why I say breaking work. Like, let's break the idea of work and start to explore what it could mean for us. Let's build what we need for our lives in order to live that grand life vision.
Mhm. Well, I think, you look at our parents or grandparents, there was a different opportunity with business because they had pensions.
Yeah. Right.
And it made sense to be like, oh, I'm 48. I got 12 more years or whatever to stick this out and I get a pension. Okay. I don't necessarily fully agree with that, but I get it.
Yeah.
Like, it actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The same with teachers go through this. Teachers have, pensions typically after 20, 25 years. I know there's different depending on the state, but what we were talking about earlier, the fear of like, oh, going out my own versus staying at a company, you don't have, you could be 52, you could be 42 right now, be like, I'm gonna grind it out. And you could be 52 and get laid off and then have a hard time getting a job. The delayed gratification is something for me that's so important. Is like, if you're 42 now, let's say, what if you try to build a business on the side for the next 3 to 5 years? Again, it doesn't have to be tomorrow.
Right.
And now you're 48 and you have that sustainable income coming in. And by the way, it's extra income from what you have with your full time. I think just a lot of it is we're talking about is it's managing your time better. It's how do you shift some of the wasted meetings and time away. Now you have some time. Maybe you have to put a few extra hours at night and weekend, and then you build your way a few years down the road. It doesn't have to be overnight. I think that's where a lot of the fear comes from. Is like, well, if I'm not going to start this business in 3 months, why do it? Well, you do it for 5 years out.
Yeah. I also think that there's like a really pe- people look at the investment in themselves or spending any money on themselves for this business as like just a risk and a loss, and it's just
Mm,
gone. But like you can just do a mindset shift. Like, all right, if you're throwing $1,000 a month in your 401k, those are going into businesses that are trying to generate growth. Like there's ups and downs all over with that. You're just shifting some of that savings and putting it into yourself. Now, technically, maybe there's a higher chance of like losing that money, but the money is not the only point. There's all this extra stuff, this upside. Again, I go back to like, we can't envision the upside. There's so
yeah.
much upside that even if you don't achieve the vision that you want to set out, like build the business that is in the back of your head, there are
Mhm.
all of these things that you need to just make space for that are positives. The feeling, the just being freer at work, being able to tolerate more, the learning, the teaching your kids to go for it, like all sorts of things that are there. And by the way, I think your odds of succeeding when your heart is really aligned in there are way better than the average. It's not an
Yeah.
80% chance that your business fails. It's way, way, way less because it's you and you are behind it and you're feeling it and you are willing to make all the little micro tweaks, but in your heart of heart, you know you're at your best going in this direction.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. And that's maybe a good place to kind of wrap up on. I want to end with one question because I like folks with just get started to take action.
Yeah.
So you could give advice, but what I would encourage is if you have anything, someone's starting today, or like I said, they have that idea, man, you know what, I do really want to get out of my job, or think about it, or try something new on the side that I've never done. What would be a challenge? Maybe it's something you would give them to take an action today. It's a question maybe to ask themselves to start the rumination of their head. But anything to get started, anything you'd share?
I think everything starts with noticing. So, what I would say is depending on, what is that feeling that you're having that's sparking the thought in your head? And just start to notice. Maybe it's a journal challenge every every day or something like that. Maybe it's just spend 5 minutes and just ask yourself why with every thought that comes into your head. That is where to me the start happens. So, I want to start a business. Why? I hate my job. Why? Because when you understand what you're running from or understand what you're running towards, you can make better decisions. And I think the biggest thing is we have to be truthful with ourselves. We lie to ourselves so much. And so the reflection and the journaling and going deeper and just asking why and like, what is the true motivation? What's the real thing there? It makes all the difference. So I would say get a piece of paper every morning, 5 minutes, and whatever thought comes into your head about that thing, just ask yourself why. And you're going to get to a place where you feel really, really foundationally good about what you want to do next.
All right, there you go. That's where you start. Ask why. Mike, this is a lot of fun, man. Where can folks say hi to you online? Where do you spend the most time?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So Michael Gardon, Gardon. You can find me there. And on my personal website, also Michael Gardon, all together.com. You can find anything about my coaching or all my writing, my newsletters, all there. Please say hi. come say hi on LinkedIn. Ask me any type of question that you'd like. Love hearing from folks. And those are the two spots. Brian, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, Mike. Thanks again, man. I appreciate it.